I don't know if I can talk. Thank you. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce a very special lady here today, Dr. Suzanna Hupp from Texas, and she has quite a story to tell. But not only a story to tell, but she has been instrumental in right-to-carry laws being passed all over this country. And we can't thank her enough for joining us today here in our fight in Illinois for the right to carry. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Suzanna Hupp, former Texas legislator and wonderful person.
Thank you, guys. God, I'm pumped. Awesome. Y'all come on in. All you guys standing in back, come on in and find a place to sit. Come on in. Come on. This is not church. You can't sit in the back pew. You can't stand at the back. If y'all want to come on in and sit down, please feel free to do so. I am pumped to be here, seriously. You know, I got to tell you, I like speaking to the non-choir. I like speaking to the non-gunnies, but sometimes it just kind of warms the cockles of my soul to be amongst like-minded people. So thank you guys so much for coming today and taking it. It amazes me that there are this many people here on a weekday. That says volumes to your legislators. Well, I want to tell you, I've had a lot of people ask me why I'm here today, and it's the primary reason is because it's personal. It's personal for me. I didn't grow up in a house with guns, and some of you have heard me speak before and talk about this, and my apologies to you if I bore you with this story yet again. But I did grow up in a house where my father was an expert on the founding of the country, so I knew what the Second Amendment was for. I knew what it was all about. When I was 21, a friend of mine gave me a gun, taught me how to use it, and I carried it in my purse for many years. Several years ago, in fact, it's hard to imagine now, it's been a couple of decades ago, my parents and I went to a local cafeteria. It was a bright, sunny day, crowded place. We weren't in some dark alley where we weren't supposed to be. We were sitting and enjoying having lunch with a manager of the cafeteria, a dear friend of mine, when all of a sudden, a madman crashed his truck through the window, all the way through the window, ran it into the restaurant, knocked over a number of the tables. I began to raise up and started to go help the people that he had knocked over. The truck was maybe, 15, 18 feet from me. But then we heard gunshots. My father and I immediately got down on the floor, put the table up in front of us. My mother got down behind us. Now remember, this was 2 decades ago. These mass shootings that we're seeing now weren't occurring back then. So I was looking for an explanation. I was waiting for the guy to say something like, all right, everybody put your wallets on the tables. After that, I thought, well, maybe it's a hit. Maybe somebody important's in here. But he just kept shooting. I couldn't see him initially. He was on the other side of the truck. But about 45 seconds passed as he worked his way around the front of the truck, and I was able to visually see him take aim, pull the trigger, go to the next person, take aim, pull the trigger, go to the next person about this fast, take aim, and pull the trigger. 45 seconds to figure out that this guy was just there to kill people. It was not the first thing that came to mind. And I've got to tell you, 45 seconds is an eternity. Well, I thought, I've got him. I've got this guy. Now realize at this point, almost everybody in the restaurant is down. He was standing up. He was maybe 15 feet from me, and I've hit much smaller targets at much greater distances. And I reached for my purse, which was on the floor next to me. I had a place to prop my arm where the table was upturned. But then I realized a few months earlier, I made the stupidest decision of my life. At that time in the state of Texas, it was illegal to carry a gun on your person. Now, I carried it illegally for years because an assistant district attorney in Houston convinced me to do so. But once I moved out to the country, I did what most people do. I figure, what are the odds? If I need a gun, it's going to be if my car breaks down on a back Texas road somewhere. It's sure as heck not going to be in a crowded place in the middle of the day. So my gun was 100 yards away, completely useless to me. I remember looking at my purse thinking, great, what do I do now? Throw my purse at him? You can't go up against a guy with a firearm with your butter knife. It doesn't work. At that point, my dad took my attention. He was next to me, and he said, come on, or he said, I've got to do something. He's going to kill everybody in here. And I tried to hold him down by the shirt collar, but when he saw what he thought was a chance, he broke loose from me and he went at the guy. But the gunman had complete control over the restaurant, and he simply turned and shot my dad in the chest. My dad went down. He had covered maybe half the distance. And he was alive and still conscious, but I saw the wound, and as dreadful as this may sound, I wrote him off at that point. The good news was that it made the gunman change direction slightly. Instead of continuing directly toward me, he went off to my left a little bit. And that was the first time I really got a look at him, a really good look. He was about my age at the time, 30-something. Pretty good-looking guy, well-dressed, brand-new truck, and the stupid things that go through your mind. I remember thinking, what could be so wrong in this man's life? But it doesn't really matter, does it? You can analyze it all day long, but the fact of the matter is, evil exists. The other side would like you to talk him out of it. Evil exists. Shortly after that, I heard a window break at the back of the restaurant, and I thought, oh, God, here comes another one. But then I saw people actually getting out of the restaurant that way. So I looked up over the top of my upturned table, and when I saw the guy's back to me, I reached around, I grabbed my mother by the shirt collar, I said, come on, we got to run, we got to get out of here, and my feet grew wings. I was one of the only people from that front area to make it out that back window. We were kind of cornered up there. Once I made it through the window, I ran into my manager friend who had come out of the kitchen area. He said, thank God you're all right. I said, yeah, but Dad's been hit and it's bad. And I turned to say something to my mom, and that was the first time I realized she hadn't followed me out. Now, to make a long story short, in an odd twist of gun control fate, the police officers, many of whom were patients of mine, were one building away in a conference, in a hotel. The hotel manager had asked them to please leave their loaded weapons in their locked trunks because she didn't want to offend any of her patrons or worry them. Precious moments were lost while those officers retrieved those weapons. I told you several were patients of mine. And about a week later, they told me what happened. They said they got into the restaurant, and at that moment they didn't know who the gunman was. But they did see a woman on the floor, out in the aisle, cradling a mortally wounded man. They said that they watched this 30-something-year-old guy walk up to her, put a gun to her head. They said she looked up at him, put her head down, and he pulled the trigger. That's how they knew who the gunman was. They said all they had to do was fire a shot into the ceiling, and this guy rabbited to a back bathroom alcove area, exchanged a little gunfire with him, and put a bullet in his own brain. That was my parents. It didn't occur to me as I was running out the back window, my mom wasn't going anywhere without Dad. They had just had their 47th wedding anniversary. She wasn't going anywhere. 23 people were killed that day. Now, this may sound a little odd to you, but I'm not mad at the guy that did it. To me, that's like being mad at like a rabid dog. You don't be mad at a rabid dog. You might take it out behind the barn and kill it, but you don't be mad at it. But I said, and if you don't believe me, you can check the papers. The day after this, I said I was mad as hell at my legislators because they had legislated me out of the right to protect myself and my family. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13 14 15 16 17 18 19 20 21 22 23 24 25 26 27 28 29 30 31 32 33 34 35 36 37 38 39 40 41 42 43 44 45 46 47 48 49 50 51 52 53 54 55 56 57 58 59 60 61 62 63 64 65 66 67 68 69 70 71 72 73 74 75 76 77 78 79 80 81 82 83 84 85 86 87 88 89 90 91 92 93 94 95 96 97 98 99 100 101 102 103 104 105 106 107 108 109 110 111 112 113 114 115 116 117 118 119 120 121 122 123 124 125 126 127 128 129 130 131 132 133 134 135 136 137 138 139 140 141 142 143 144 145 146 147 148 149 150 151 152 153 154 155 156 157 158 159 160 Now, no. Thank you. But, the funny thing is, then I became one. I was a legislator in Texas for 12 years and recently retired. Since that time, every state in the country has gotten concealed carry except for Illinois. Aren't y'all proud? It's embarrassing, isn't it? Now, I've got to tell you, it's the other side that calls you guys and women radical. They call you extremists. They call you discriminatory. They call you racist. Now, think about this. Now, I've been all over the country. I've been to may-issue states. Y'all are mostly familiar with those. For those that aren't, a may-issue state is where some bureaucrat gets to decide whether or not you can carry a gun. Guess what happens? The 50-something-year-old white guys in the rural areas get to carry. The poor black woman in the inner city with 4 kids and a crack house across the street from her with bullets flying over her kid's head every night doesn't get one. She doesn't get to protect herself. That sounds a little racist to me, certainly discriminatory at best. So you guys remember, when you're talking to the media, when you're talking to the legislature, it's the other side that's radical and extremist. And if there's any doubt, they're talking about taking 200 years of our Constitution and tradition and flushing it down the toilet. That sounds pretty radical to me. Discriminatory at best. Racist? Yeah. I think it definitely has the potential. Your Chicago legislators are screaming for local control and home rule. Let's talk about that for just a second, shall we? We don't leave the U.S. Constitution up to local control. Can you just imagine, and you remember when you're speaking politely to your legislators, can you imagine if we had left the 15th Amendment up for local control? That's the amendment that allowed blacks to vote. What if we left the 19th Amendment, that's women to vote? What if we left that up to local control? What if we left freedom of the press up to local control? It's a ridiculous argument, isn't it? Please feel free to use it. Perhaps it's that the Chicago legislators somehow feel that their own constituents are inherently more irresponsible than the rest of America. And if that's the case, I think their own, and if there's any media here, I hope you're getting this, because their constituents should be asking them that question. Why is it that you think that I am somehow inherently more irresponsible, stupid, or just plain violent than the rest of America? Explain that to me, Mr. Congressman or Mrs. Senator. Explain that to me. Now, look, I'm not a one-issue voter, okay? But if I was going to pick an issue, this is it, baby. And let me tell you why. Because look, I know when you get those voter certificates in front of you, when you get your ballot in front of you, rather, you're going to see names on there that you have no clue who those people are, or you have a vague idea, right? Especially when it comes to judges. When you're at those candidates forum, you can't find out everything about them, neither can I. Here's your one question. Find out where they stand on the Second Amendment, and here's why. It tells you exactly where that person views you, their constituent, whether you're someone to be lorded over or whether you're part of that whole we the people that they're there to serve. Now, for those of you that aren't sure exactly where you stand, I want to just bring this to your attention. Imagine yourself when you leave here, when you're done with the march, when you're done talking to the legislators, imagine that you go to your local restaurant cafeteria and you're minding your own business. And all of a sudden, you happen to notice out of the corner of your eye some young man walk in a trench coat, and you think, well, gosh, that's a little odd, but it doesn't really register in your brain until he pulls out a firearm and at point-blank range kills the elderly woman in front of him. And then he turns and he kills the cashier across from her. As that madman is walking around the room, taking aim and having complete control over that circumstance, as he's leveling his gun on your 2-year-old's forehead, even if you've chosen not to have a gun, don't you hope the guy behind you has it and knows how to use it? Remind the legislators of that. Sometimes they just haven't put themselves in those shoes. Ask them to name one single place where a mass shooting has occurred where guns were allowed. Guns were not allowed, sir. They were not allowed to carry guns on Fort Hood. You can't name one. Because when a madman wants to rack up a high body bag count, they go where they know they can shoot people like fish in a barrel. If guns are the problem, then somebody explain to me why we haven't seen these mass shootings at NRA conventions, or the gun shows, the dreaded gun shows, or skeet and trap shoots, or anything where there are thousands of guns in the hands of at least as many law-abiding citizens. Somebody explain that to me. There's zero logic. So yeah, it's personal. I'll tell you that I'd much rather be sitting in jail with a felony offense on my head and have my parents alive to know their grandchildren. I'd like to finish with letting you all know that I know it's hard sometimes, at least it is for me, because sometimes you think what you do doesn't matter. But I promise you guys, you stick it out, you will be heard. Know that you guys are doing the right thing. I thank you for what you do.